Hassan is on the line from Slough. Tell us what you think, Hassan.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. Prayers go out to everyone. It is shocking, and I commend the police for the quick lightning speed reaction. As you may know, I have been involved with Prevent, and it is an excellent policy. It has been relatively successful since the time of its inception. And I think that should be, and I agree with you, that should be strengthened. Yes, there are critics of Prevent, even from non-Muslims, but I think there's a big misunderstanding of Prevent even today. As you said, this is to do with the political manifestation or the misuse of religion, and that should be targeted. I said for a decade now that we should challenge the terrorist ideology, because that's the only way we're going to reach those followers, because they're not going to listen to the imams, because they think the imams are a bunch of sellouts, and a lot of those imams are living under death threats as well. So that's the only way we can challenge them, and I'm glad that Theresa May and even David Cameron, I remember, said that we should challenge that openly. My other point is regard to foreign policy, because I know a lot of people will say, and Jeremy Corbyn actually said this, and I would challenge him on this, that foreign policy is to do with this reaction. That is a complete red herring for a couple of reasons. Firstly, ISIS was actually created not in reaction to foreign policy, but as a result of allied foreign policy when a vacuum was created in the Middle East. This might be some reassurance to the non-Muslims, although it's not technically a reassurance, it's the wrong word. But the majority of victims of terrorism have actually been in Muslim countries, and that's according to the global.
That's why I mentioned the Baghdad attack and the Afghanistan attack in Kabul before that happened, just before this attack and after the Manchester one. So there have been major attacks between the two that we've experienced here as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the Global Terrorism Database, which is run by the University of Maryland, they've been tracking all these fatalities from terrorism from 2001 to 2015, and 75% of the 167,000 deaths were actually in Muslim countries. So what that means is ISIS is an enemy to civilization, Muslims and non-Muslims.
Hassan, I want to ask you a question. You said you worked in Prevent. Do you still work in Prevent?
Yes, on a voluntary basis. I'm a RAP trainer, so that's a workshop to raise awareness of Prevent. I'm a school governor, so through that route, I have spoken about it, and also I've spoken to...
Just for the listeners, what RAP, as in Radicalisation Awareness Programme?
Yeah, correct. That's right. How to spot radicalisation. And I've debated with some of the radicals as well on local radio in Slough, because I believe there was a huge misunderstanding and scaremongering about Prevent in the Muslim community.
Who do you think's behind that? That's why I was asking you. Because there are certain lobby groups that are behind it. What's your perspective on this?
Who's behind well, I think a lot of these radical groups are behind it. I mean, when I debated on local radio 2 years ago during Ramadan, there was someone from Hizb ut-Tahrir. You were a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir at that time. They are fanning the flames, I think, and Cage as well. I think Prevent is foolproof. There may be some mistaken referrals, and that's how they would magnify that as an attack on Muslims. If there is any blowback against Muslims, it's not because of Prevent or the government. There is no government conspiracy against Islam. It's the terrorists' fault. We should blame them. My final point, if I may, you mentioned about Saudi Arabia or one other caller. I hope that the $100 billion they've actually invested in buying arms, they actually pull out of Yemen and go for ISIS, obliterate them, and send them to hell where they belong.
All right, Hassan, thank you for that. Brian,
Hassan's in Slough. Hassan, what would you like to say?
I just want to apologise. I didn't ring you the day after Manchester attacks because I just couldn't pick up the phone. Because I've been on air so many times condemning terrorism. I just didn't know what news.
That's all right. You don't need to apologise for that, Hassan. I know you're a regular and welcome contributor to all of LBC's programming, and I know also that you've been politically engaged and involved also with Prevent. So I'm always interested to hear what you have to say.
No, thanks, James. So a couple of things. Firstly, terrorism is an enemy to civilization. Now, there was a lot of talk about Saudi money and Wahhabism and all that, and I just do not buy that argument because...
Really?
Saudi Arabia... Sorry, go on.
You don't buy that argument? Because that is something we're going to move on to, is this report into the funding of jihadi groups that Jeremy Corbyn and Tim Farron both want the Prime Minister to publish, and at the moment it's believed that it focuses on Saudi Arabia, and the Prime Minister won't publish it. I have to also point out, and this is where your regularity on the programme perhaps becomes something of a double-edged sword, I have to point out that you have stood for Parliament as a Conservative candidate in the past.
Yes, in 2005, yes.
Because this is quite potentially politically damaging to Theresa May if there's a report that links Saudi Arabia to Wahhabism and the promotion overseas, and she won't publish the report.
I'll need to look into that.
We're going to talk about it in the next hour, so...
Yeah, no, because as far back as 1998, the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia had issued edicts or fatwas against Osama bin Laden and those groups. And in 2014, there was a conference held in Mecca about extremism and counterterrorism, and they did declare that ISIS is the number one enemy to Islam.
But then Prince Saud, one of the key diplomats, told John Kerry a few years ago that Daesh was the natural response, and I think he used the phrase our response to the rise of Iranian-backed militias elsewhere in the Middle East. I don't want to get too bogged down in all of this, but if you were in charge and you could change something now, what would it be?
Use the Saudi money they're buying, purchasing American weapons to obliterate ISIS altogether and prevent. I can hear the music, so I'll be very quick. Prevent. I've been involved with Prevent, and I think it's been slated.
Unfairly maligned, although, it reminds me a little bit of Stop and Search. It clearly has a noble purpose and a noble aim, but perhaps some of the implementation does more harm than good. But you don't throw the baby out with that particular bathwater. Thank you, Hassan.